Hi folks, my name is Spence and you're very welcome to this Irish Gothic Bite-sized podcast. And today we're going to take a look at the work of Sam Henry and one of his particular stories. Now, Sam Henry was born in Coleraine in 1878 on the north coast of Northern Ireland there, and he is known as a folklorist, widely recognised for his Songs of the People series. Now, what Sam did was he travelled the rural countryside and he gathered together mostly songs, but also folklore tales and stories, and he kept these traditions alive. Now, cut to the present day, and there's another character called Colin Irwin. Now, Colin is a modern day Shanachie, a storyteller. He's a folk singer and a songwriter, and he has lovingly revisited all Sam's work and brought these stories into the light. As I say, Sam was more known for perhaps for curating songs, but he also curated stories, folklore stories, and Colin has lovingly brought these stories to life in a book called the Arn Hagg. Now, the Arn Hagg is very production of. I mean, this book I got free. It's produced by the council, by Causeway Coasting Glens. So this book, the Arn Hagg, is out there. It's free. I would encourage you to get your hands on it any way you can. It is a phenomenal read and a super gateway to the works of Sam Henry and indeed Colin Irwin. So I am going to recite one of the stories from Hagg. I will not do it justice at all, but this is just to give you a little bit of a flavour and have you look and explore.
Welcome to the first of our Gothic Bites. These are 5-10 minute bites of just something that maybe has to do with the bigger episode each week. This coming episode, which is Giant's Causeway, I decided to do a place called Dark Hedges. The Dark Hedges is an avenue of beech trees in County Antrim, Northern Ireland. The trees form an atmospheric tunnel that has been used as a location by Game of Thrones. It resulted in it being a major tourist attraction. But where did it start? Well, in 1775, James Stewart built a new house called Grace Hill House after his wife Grace Lind. Over 150 beech trees were planted along the entrance to the road and created an auspicious approach. This is fantastic because you'll see this in any photograph, this tunnel of trees. According to legend, the hedges are visited by a ghost called the Grey Lady, who travels the road and flits across it from tree to tree. She is claimed to be either the spirit of James Stewart's daughter, named Cross Peggy, or one of those housemaids, or one of the house's maids who died mysteriously, or a spirit from an abandoned graveyard beneath the fields who on Halloween is joined on her visitation by other spirits from the graveyard. The Dark Hedges was used as a filming location for the King's Road in the first series of Game of Thrones. The trees were used also in the trees were also used in the 2017 Transformers film The Last Night. As these trees are now basically old age pensioners, only 90 remain of the original 150. And those remaining are considered past maturity. This means that in previous years, when we have had storms and wind, a lot of them have blown down. In 2017, due to the damage of tourism, the road itself was closed to vehicular traffic. This has managed to keep some of the trees intact, whereas before, this has managed to keep a number of the trees still intact. It also means that you can go and visit the Dark Hedges today and walk up the road amongst the trees and imagine what it was like when it had the full 150 trees. The Dark Hedges is most definitely a place to visit if you come to our neck of the woods. See you next week.
Or further, the works of Sam Henry. Okay, so we will take a little look at Fire and Brimstone at Duncrue. Of all the many castles and strongholds along the Antrim coast, Duncrue, Fort of Soarca, meaning sober, is a 15th century chieftain whose name it still bears. That's where it gets its name from. Perhaps it has the most long and colourful past. It is said that the stone walls and the chambers have echoed to the names of the mighty Colin himself and the first century Red Branch Knights, Earls of Ulster, the O'Neills, even St. Patrick was once said to have sheltered there. So from these beginnings, we're going to jump forward a wee bit further in time to the 12th century. And let's just read from the Arn Hagg. The mighty O'Cahans were firmly installed at Duncrue, from where they kept lookout across the sea for Viking invaders. At this time, news reached Ireland from Flanders that an army was being raised to join the Crusades. Young Turla O'Cahan asked and was given permission by his father to enlist, and along with other chieftains, sons and warriors, he went off to fight in the Holy Lands. But before long, word came back these young Irish soldiers were distinguishing themselves by their great valour in battle, commitment to faith, and indeed their gift for poetry, stories, and song. Their reputation as warriors and scholars was second to none, none more so than Turla O'Cahan. Victory soon followed, and after that, Geoffrey de Bouillon was crowned King of Jerusalem and appointed protector of the holy sepulchre of the Crusaders. Ireland welcomed the bitter winds that swept the Sea of Moyle, and it whipped into a galloping herd of furious white-maned horses. Then and only then could they lie their beds at night, content they were safe from the attention of Viking raiders. When the wind blew steadily from the north and the sea was favourable for long-distance voyaging, everyone dreaded what might appear over that northern horizon. So in Turloch's absence, a much weakened, poorly defended Duncrue castle fell to the trickery of a marauding Norseman called Jarl Hakon, Earl Hakon, who had landed further along the coast under cover of darkness. And on his order, almost everyone in the castle, including the old O'Cahan chieftain, Turla's father, was put to the sword. Only young O'Cahan, Turla's beloved sister, was spared, and Earl Hakon had made up his mind to have her for his bride and lady. "I would rather die than be wed to a pagan," she answered, and whether Earl Hakon admired her courage or he so desired her to accept her willingly as her husband, he declared his love for her and agreed to be baptized as a Christian. 2 priests came from the monastery to preside over the joint ceremonies of Earl Hakon's baptism, which was then to be followed by his marriage to Lady O'Cahan. Well, a great assembly of grimacing Norsemen watched their leader kneel before the priest to confess his sins and bear witness to his conversion to Christianity. And as the priest leaned Earl Hakon back to pour the holy water over his brow and so complete the sacrament, a tall, powerful figure of a man pushed his way to the front. He was clad in a ragged, heavy cloak of the Irish fashion, held fast at his breast by a gold Tara brooch. He was unarmed, and the skin of his bare forearms and face was as brown as a nut, and under his long wild hair and beard, Lady O'Cahan saw it was her brother, Turla. "I will baptize the heathen with Greek fire," he cried, and he rushed forward. On stopping a little vial he had hidden under his cloak, Turla pitched the contents over his most despised enemy. There was a flash and a flare of bright light, and a gasp of horror and fear followed. Earl Hakon cried out in agony as he suddenly and inexplicably burst into flames. Not satisfied with this attack, but what everyone thought must be brimstone, in his final fury the terrible acrid stench of burning hair and flesh caught in the throats of everyone who was near, and their stomachs churned and heaved. No one dared to go near the 2 grappled warriors for fear they too would be engulfed, and the flames quickly spread onto the heavy wall hangings and loose floor coverings. There was no witnesses to the final gruesome demise of Earl Hakon and Turla, except perhaps the young and innocent Lady O'Cahan. And as the flames leapt higher and higher, the castle became a crackling inferno. The young noblewoman screamed and hurled herself from a window into the restless sea 100 feet below, and never spoke another word. Her desperate act was perhaps hastened by her anguish and the knowledge that all belonging to her and all that she loved were now all dead. Well, very soon the whole castle was ablaze, and as the roof timbers began to flare up, the Norsemen fled for their lives. Waiting for them were the O'Cahan warriors, returned from the Crusades with their beloved Captain Turla. Earl Hakon's men were all of them hacked down by the score and thrown over the precipice into the sea. None survived. The place is still known as Ben Andonur, the Cliff of the Danes. Duncrue was reduced to a blackened shell. It was not the first time the castle had been laid to waste, as some years later it was rebuilt. Today there are only a few remnants of the 6 feet thick entrance walls which Cromwell's soldiers were unable to completely demolish, but still remain. And to this day the people who live in Duncrue village nearly often report, even over the sound of a howling winter gale, they can still hear the terrible cries of Row, the old common banshee. Perhaps they can, but in the midst of a storm, when the wind is screeching in the heavens and the waves are crossing over the ruins of Duncrue, it would be a brave woman or a foolhardy man who would go down to that little promontory and look into the churning chasm to see for themselves. If they did, they might just discover that fearful wailing is the tortured soul of young Lady O'Callaghan herself, eternally reenacting her death leap from the castle walls into the sea, accompanied by the ghostly cries of those Viking invaders, beseeching the Valkyries to guide their spirits safely to Val. So, folks, that was an appeal called Fire and Brimstone at Duncrue. It was taken from the collections of Sam Henry, that great folklorist, and brought to us through the book, The Arn Hagg, by the wonderful Colin Irwin, whose words I've just read. So, as I said before, please take that book out. It can be got Causeway, Glens, Borough, and through the Museum Association. As I said, this was just a wee bite-sized episode. You met that we did that our famous hero warrior, the Hound of Ulster himself, Cahulan. And that indeed will be our next full-sized episode of Irish Gothic, when I'll be rejoined with my good friend Chris, and we're going to look at Cahulan's sad story from his origins to his childhood, his adulthood, and his eventual death. So thanks for being with us for this bite-sized. Take care.